Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out this afternoon on this important day. And it's kind of hard to put the word Happy VE Day in front of the term, but it is a day to celebrate and to remember as well. And no better guide than to take us back through the events that led to VE Day than this gentleman to my right. Mr. Carter has been doing this for a very, very long time and is a noted historian, military historian here in our area, active member of the Boy Scouts and working with Boy Scouts, a son of the American Revolution as well, and just a terrific person to have as a resource in our community. So, Carter, I'm going to turn it over to you. And
thank you. And I have good help today. Brandy Pethel is regent of the James Pittman chapter DAR, and Needham is, well, she's CAR, she's also DAR, or close to be. And where are you in CAR now?
I'm the state chaplain.
State chaplain. So we're working as a team, and today's a good day because, yes, this is the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in Europe. We won't get too specific today, not enough time. It's also an element of oops, I did it wrong, of America 250. Next year, this time, 2026, will be 250 years of this country, this nation that God gave us. And so everything we do is a celebration from Sons of the American Revolution, Daughters of the American Revolution, Children of the American Revolution, and every one of you too. So I guess we're talking specifically World War II. And this is Europe in 1930s or so. And Europe was in terrible troubles, and Germany was in even worse terrible troubles. Mostly, initially, from the impact, the punitive impact of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany in World War I was absolutely, collapsed. The Kaiser ran away to Netherlands and never came back. Police departments and fire departments just didn't exist anymore. Whole regiments of the German army mutinied together, officers included. They were just absolutely nothing left. Well, that, plus the punitive payments back, and by the way, Germany has finally paid all the World War I. Took June of 2010 to do it, but they did it. And so things like the Versailles Treaty, wrong one, led to hyperinflation. We talk about inflation and we argue about it politically, but imagine if an egg had been 8 cents and it was really Reichsmarks, but we'll use our money. If an egg had been 8 cents in 1913, 10 years later, it was $80 billion for an egg. Kind of makes Kroger look good by comparison these days. And so why was there inflation? Well, had to buy materials to build up the army that was not allowed, or build up the Air Force that was not allowed. All that took money. Print money for strikers. The coal miners in the Ruhr Valley went on strike for economic reasons like unions many times, too oftentimes have to do, I guess. And so just print money. And finally, the Weimar Republic, especially after the finance minister was assassinated, just kind of collapsed upon itself economically. So how did Hitler come up? Well, this is Hindenburg, handsome fella. Might be the world's first flat top haircut right there. And he was president, but president wasn't like our president. The chancellor was the controlling force. And by 1933, slow but sure, and there's a story behind it of Hitler trying a couple times and getting put in jail. So we don't have time for that. But 1933, he finally forged an alliance between several parties. He was National Democratic Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, NDSP. And in German language, it abbreviates to Nazi. That's why we call it that. He never had a majority vote. He never got more than 43% of the vote. But by building coalitions with other political parties, he did become chancellor. And then, just a few days later, out of nowhere, someone burned down the Reichstag. The Reichstag is what we would call the Capitol building. And just like we say today, you never let a good crisis go to waste. When everybody's all upset and worried and excited about it, pass a new bill. Ein Waschhüschenrecht. Well, of course, you know that means the Enabling Act. And that's what gave overwhelming, all-encompassing powers to the Chancellor. And he put it to work. From March 23, 1933, within a week, NEGAHC was set up. Within a week, political prisoners, namely political opponents, intellectuals, professors at universities, et cetera, were the first ones to NEGAHC. And so it grew and grew and grew. This is a scene from Nuremberg. And the building, well, the arena is still there. On this one, Hitler's talking to about 80,000 Wehrmacht. It's careful to remember that the Wehrmacht is a German army. SS is another private army of a political party, but eventually we too often lump them together. This is the Wehrmacht, and he's speaking to them. The good news is, swords to plowshares. I've been to this arena, and today, one time I went, and it was the parking lot for impounded cars. If you don't pay your parking, then they take it. Now, the last time I went, it's been all cleaned up, and it is now 8 soccer fields. Well, they call it foosball, but you know what I mean. And so it happened that this movement, over and over again, take over Germany. Austria, by a 99% vote, Anschluss, said, yes, we want to be part of this revival. We're under the same economic malaise or worse from the Great Depression. And so they signed it. And right away, march into Sudetenland, southern Germany, Sudetenland. And the argument was, these are really Germans. They speak German, their heritage is German. What's wrong is where the line was written after World War I. Sykes and Treaty and such did they did the best they could, but most of the arguments we have in the Middle East now is what lines they drew where between different nations or sects of nations. And so, yeah, he took over. And right away, took over all of Czechoslovakia. Well, that got to the point that all this time built up, and when it wasn't legal, take the Saar. Well, it had been France or been Germany. It's been France. We don't have time for it today, but there's a GIF that shows you how the border of Germany and France goes back to before it was Germany. It was Prussia. It's moved probably 45 times since the Romans left, on and on and on. And so we get to the Munich Agreement, September 1938. Neville Chamberlain came back and he waved the page, and what did he say? Peace in our time, yes. He had 2 reasons. One, he needed time for England, for UK, whatever you want to call it, to build up, to prepare. They knew trouble was coming, but there was resistance against it and hesitancy. On top of that, he knew he had just months to live himself. And so the thought was, what can we do in 6 months of progress? Well, it didn't work. Instead, the 1st of September, 1939, all in one night, take over that much Poland, and Russia, or Soviet Union, if you will, who had had from years before a non-aggression, a mutual non-aggression. I won't take your land, you won't take my land. We're not really buddies, but we won't be enemies. For safety's sake, took the rest of Poland as a buffer. There's been something like 7 or 8 invasions of Russia before it was Soviet Union, including one by America, by the way, 1919, in 2 places, east and west. And so Russia likes to have a buffer between them and the free world, and that's how they did it. Well, this was the news the next day. Britain gives the last warning. An ultimatum we will reject, says Berlin. In other words, there'd been hesitancy. Britain didn't want to go to war. They had lost a whole generation of young men. France didn't want to go to war. They'd lost even more of their young men in the war, and their land had been ravished worse than other places, to the point that getting ready, one of the items of getting ready was Operation Pied Piper. The idea was to get ready so when we have to, we can take the children from London, which is probably going to be the main target to be hit, artillery or aviation or both, and get them out to the countryside. Kind of like evacuate, and the proportion is not the same, but take 2 million children out of Atlanta and put them, not here, this is too close, put them in Blairsville, put them in Elberton, put them in Cartersville, way out in the country. And families took them in. Be honest, yes, there were supporters. In England, the British Union of Fascists, Oswald Mosley, a member of Parliament himself, by the way, fashioned this. It's not really a swastika, but it's close to the SS symbol, one S instead of two. And here in America, we can't be too proud. The German-American Bund was quite active and quite supportive of Germany. Because look what he'd done. Bring Germany back from absolute desolation and destruction and despair to proud of themselves and making good progress and taking that land without hardly a shot being fired. Hard to argue against it. So, well, from there, though, go to Italy. Lined up and took Albania with them. Oh, wrong one, excuse me. Drive right into Denmark. In 10 days, take over all of Denmark. Displace the entire government of Denmark. Westerberg was the name of the operation. This gentleman, Kaufman, we call him Henry, but Henrik Kaufman, was the ambassador from Denmark to the United States. Of course, when the Germans took over the Danish government, all ambassadorships were null and void and canceled. He refused to accept his cancellation. He knew the power of America and England and other allies together, that this is not going to last forever. They will prevail sooner or later. And so he had the idea from Denmark. Denmark owns, still today, Greenland, which is one of the greatest marketing scams of the world. The Vikings called Iceland, even though it's rich, green territory, and they called Greenland, even though it's all, not all, but nearly all ice. Well, the idea is, hey, FDR and Marshall and the others, would you like to have bases so you can see if German submarines or German surface ships are coming your way from the time they're in Greenland, or they're already in your back door? And they signed an agreement. See, people could argue to this day it's not legal because he was no longer the official ambassador, and signed the agreement. In perpetuity, we're allowed to have bases in Greenland. We're getting close to modern circumstances, aren't we, and discussions today. Part of it. Our first attempt to buy Greenland was 1857, and it had good progress. Would have made it other than that little difficulty about the war between the states. Took everybody's incentive, initiative, and money away from it. In perpetuity is what he said. So Westerberg was quite successful. Denmark, they're great Navy people, but they don't need to have much of a Air Force. Get to the point. I went past it a little bit, but the Maginot Line here. France had been invaded many times. 1870, Franco-Prussian War, World War I, the Germans came through Strasbourg and Nice and thereabouts. And so build the Maginot Line. Maginot was we call him the Secretary of Defense. built this fortification, and it's still there. Anybody seen it? You saw it the hard way, sir. It was very active when you were there. Well, I crawled through the first 2 layers, and it gets dark and wet and damp and mold all around. The good news is that it's been cleaned up, and you can pay a fee and go on a tour. This shows you the kind of things. It was a whole military city underground. The idea was to keep the German army from coming the usual path right there, especially after they had the Saar. Now, some people are, why didn't they go all the way through Belgium? Well, it costs money. And on top of that, there's a very dense forest, Ardennes forest, very thick. And can you drive trucks through a forest? Can you drive tanks through a forest? Not very well. What you can do is the same thing that has happened many times before, is go around it. And that's what they did. Go around it, jockeying for position, to the point that they enclosed 400,000 British expeditionary force. 400,000, that's the vast majority of the British Army at that time. Of course, the British Army, sun never sets on the British Empire. There's British, UK soldiers everywhere in the world, but 400,000 is a sizable chunk. And there they are, cut off. What are you going to do for them? What happened was good folks on their own, like you. Who has a boat on Lake Lanier? We'll pray for you. On some weekends, right? almost deck to deck across. Well, they volunteered their own boats. You wouldn't take a Lake Lanier boat out on the North Sea, though. So lash them together. It's called rafting up. Rafting up, I did it again. Now, I'm going to quit the laser. Raft them up together and tow them. A transport ship, a cargo ship couldn't come to the shore. It's too shallow. They'd run aground and never be able to back up. But these small craft take 6 or 8 soldiers at a time, wounded first, of course, and bring them all back. Got 300,000 of the 400,000 back again. Without the miracle of Dunkirk, the Battle of Dunkirk, whichever you want to call it, the war might have been over already, at least in Europe. And so we get to the point where Germany has taken all it could handle of France, and then the dashed is the Vichy government. There's a little town down close to where the French flag is, roughly southeast of there, is a puppet government. They used local officials and deputized them to work on their behalf, puppet officials like that. Notice that because France at that time had most of northern Africa, right? French Morocco, French Algeria, French so and so forth. They were colonies or subsets of France. When Germany got France, they got the North African coast too. Well, if you have all of this through Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, not Greece yet, but it's coming, where else would you go? Any guesses? Operation Sea Lion. This is a once classified map. We got it after the war, found it, Operation Sea Lion. It shows all the way down to the regimental level which units are going to come from where in Belgium and France and land where on the southern coast of England. Take over England again. And set up another puppet government with another local fella. In fact, one who had been king and turned it away because he, and especially, we won't use any pejorative terms, but you can fill in the blanks, his wife, who had been, what's a pleasant way of saying, carrying on with Ribbentrop, one of the higher ranking Nazis, reinstall him as a puppet government. Well, why didn't it happen? Things like this. The Battle of Britain, the first war in the history, the first battle in any war ever recorded, entirely in the air. No infantry, no artillery, No armor, no Navy, it was all in the air. And there you see the German bombers, the two most common ones, Heinkel 111 and Messerschmitt, but call it British Flughof 110. They came and they did a whopping on downtown London. You see the red and the dark red, but then the purple is the greatest in density. Good idea to get those 800,000 kids out of town? Did it pay off? Should we thank Neville Chamberlain for staying on the job when he could have called in sick, for having the presence of mind to make it work that way? What won the Battle of Britain was roughly equal capacities, maybe more on the German side, in fact, depending on what type of aircraft you're talking about. But a new technology, radar. Radar is an acronym, radio detection and ranging. And here you see examples of Great Britain's radar of the day. And this young woman, I think she's the first one to be online. She is wired in, watching the scope, seeing where the German planes are coming today, how many, how high, how fast, which direction, and she's got a live line to one or another fighter squadron, such that the Germans believe that the British had 2 or 3 times as many fighter aircraft as they really did, because they always seem to be in the right place wherever they come. Come over the North Sea, come over the Channel, come high or come low across the ocean. The radar from high altitudes could find German planes 100 miles away. Skimming the water, maybe only 35 miles away. But if your Spitfire is already running and warmed up and loaded, you can get gone in a hurry. That's a Spitfire and the BF-109. Please always say BF-109. Somebody mentions a ME-109. They've just lost a little bit of credibility with me, because in the whole period of the war, there was never an ME-109. The confusion comes from Messerschmitt bought out British Flugwacht, BF, British Flugwachts, partway through their ascension. And they kept the very fine aircraft, the 109, still in. Truth be told, there are 12 ME-109s produced in Czechoslovakia on license after the war and sold various places around the world. But 2, not exactly the same design or capacity, but one has a Rolls-Royce engine, and one started, the Messerschmitt, the BF, started with Rolls-Royce and switched to Daimler or Mercedes-Benz later on. This is the tally. Allies, and I say allies because remember, Poland just didn't exist. I mean, if I had another graphic, the flag would go and plant over in London. But a lot of Polish soldiers, a lot of Polish aviators got out and did very, very well as a separate squadron within the RAF, Royal Air Force. So start with 1,900, almost 2,000, and lose 3 out of 4 of them. Germans started with 2,500 and lost almost 1,900. Why the greater loss rate, 1,500 versus 4,300? Well, a fighter plane is 1 person per plane. A bomber is 3 or 4, depending on which model of bomber you have. On top of that, the war is being fought over England. British pilot gets shot, his plane gets shot up, he parachutes down and he's in friendly territory. Can be back to his squadron base in just a little while. Not the German, he's interned, or more so for the, that's where, get into, so it was overwhelming, oh, I forgot. Notice, civilian casualties. Those bombers, London and elsewhere. Remember this, in anything I've ever studied of any war, it's the civilians that suffer worse than the sum of both combating forces. My grandson's a good example. We took Fallujah, and then we gave it back again. That's political. And then we took it again. In the second battle of Fallujah, he was there. We lost Americans and their allies, mostly Americans, lost 262 soldiers. The Afghans with this lost about 1,200. Don't know about the enemy because it's hard to count them, especially if there's nothing left from F-16 or an Apache helicopter, hair, teeth, and eyeballs. What are you going to count? But over 3,000 civilians in Fallujah. It's always going to be that way, sad but true. So we get to Operation Mercury. If we can't go to England, then go to Norway. And I already did it. Take Norway. Why Norway? Well, there's iron ore there. And some other, also a good place for heavy water, working at H3O, which was important in their attempts of the atomic bomb that never made it, thank goodness. You see the other developments along the way. To the extent that first ever airborne operation. Fly the airplanes, have a landing force that follows up, but fly the airplanes and, wrong one. Norway was surprisingly, fantastically successful. Everybody was happy with it. The airborne troops went in and took over crossroads and railroad stations, and the landing force had an easier time of it. Here in America, we took note of that and started our own airborne operation. Any guesses where? Right up the road. Currahee. Currahee was the birthplace of American aviator or paratrooper, airborne delivered troops. And so, with that, what's left to do? Four million soldiers on a front 1,800 miles long. That would be, let's say, Mississippi River is a good example. If 4 million soldiers lined up from Sault Ste. Marie to Pensacola, and they came across all the way to at least here, maybe almost to the coast in some places. That's how far they went. What stopped them? Well, Soviets can put up a good fight. But what stopped them was the Soviet winter. The same thing that stopped Napoleon, the same thing that stopped the Huns, the same thing that stopped every time that somebody makes a mistake of going in Soviet winter. Degrees at 50 degrees below zero. The oil in your engine turns to a jelly. Mere seconds of exposure of bare skin is frostbite. Absolutely terrible. They started too late, and they diverted to come down to Romania for their oil fields, and that diluted the effect of the force going forward. So then came, finally, and this is the only time we'll mention it, Pearl Harbor, the fight in the Pacific. That's what changed Americans' mind. That American bond dissolved pretty quick when they knew there was our war to be fought. And so less than a year later, from the 7th of December, 1941, to the 8th of November, less than a year left, we went to North Africa. Get the biggest foothold you can, and probably against the easiest place to approach. And then a little bit of deception. Make them think you're going to come to the west part or the center or the eastern part, and instead do all three of them at the same time. This is one of the commanders, not the initial commander, but one of the commanders. Recognize him? Also known as Blood and Guts. The only American general ever to win an Olympic medal. Any guesses? Yep, pistol. He was that good at it, so on and so forth. Old Ironsides was there. Hell on Wheels was there. That's the 9th Division, which is famous mostly for Forrest Gump, sad to be true, in the 9th Division, but they did well in those days too. But not immediately. Someplace across, by the way, when Torch happened, the Vichy government went away. Germany took over all of France and dissolved the Vichy government. So there we are, working our way across. There's a mountain range right about where those figures are lined up, military flags are lined up. And you can see the mountain's pretty thick, except for Kasserine Pass. There's one pass through. It's kind of like Daniel Boone went through the Cumberland Gap. He didn't find it, but he went through it. And many people came. Well, Kasserine Pass was our first baptism by fire. Those three divisions. Very well equipped and quite well trained all over America and the war games in Louisiana, etc. They thought they were ready, but they weren't. In 5 days, we lost 10,000 soldiers. We lost 183 tanks. Well, we can make tanks. General Motors quit making cars and made tanks. Ford, Chrysler, Packard, Studebaker made trucks and tanks in just a matter of months from quitting cars. If you have a 1943 car, let me know. There were some for government purposes. New leadership, and we won't get into that, but it's a classical case of you try something new and it didn't work at all. Do you quit? Not Americans. We find another way. We look at what we did wrong. We do it better the next time, and that's what they did. Led to a different type of warfare. And work out. Alexander, 15th Army Group, their first airborne operation. And take Sicily. And then come to the toe, and General Clark on one side. Oh, I hate this one. There. Too sensitive. Work way up. Italy, a terrible, difficult terrain, and ever more dense enemy. The further you go up a peninsula, the longer are your lines of supply, and the shorter your enemies are. The further you go, the more manpower you need, and the time the enemy is getting more dense. Now the allegory or parallel is football. 20-yard line is the red zone. Can't throw the long bomb anymore, the pass. Well, that's what happened. Spring, and the snow melts away, and the Soviets are coming back, working our way to the point of the 8th Air Force and the 15th Air Force flying these fine aircraft. The Boeing B-17, the Flying Fortress. Nickname came from a newspaper person who walked around it and counted 10 machine guns and says it's a flying fortress, and the name stuck. The other one is Liberator, and yes, it looks like a sea boat because it's a development from a sea boat. And both of them very fine aircraft, although I bet at World War II roundtable, sir, do you get into arguments all the time, B-17, 24? Yeah, it's whichever one you're flying in is the one you like right now. It's like that. Ask my uncle-in-law. He was in B-24s. Like that. They did very well as far as they could go. It did it again. Until the Germans came after them with those Bf-109s and a lot of other good aircraft too, not to put them down. And so what are you going to do? Well, there it is. The Spitfire, P-51, the Mustang, a development from the A-35 and a pretty good aircraft until somebody put that same Rolls-Royce engine from a Spitfire into a Mustang. The Mustang cars on the road you see today, even, yes, the electric ones, were inspired. The spirit and enthusiasm and the appeal and the devotion to the Spitfire were carried through to the 1960s when Ford Motor Company decided to take a Ford Falcon and fancify it and bring the gravitas, the image of the Spitfire with it. And so there's the Spitfires. And slow but sure, established absolute air power. There wasn't a time after this phase of the summer of 42 and going in fall of 42, going in 43, where there was not much of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, left. And after that, your bombers can go all the way to Germany if they want to. In the meantime, the Soviets are coming with a vengeance for the way the Wehrmacht and the SS especially had mistreated the land and the populace and the crops as they came. This is the one, this is Goering. It says, if one English bomber reaches my name is no longer her, it's Hermann Meyer. Meyer is milk and a Milch in Eyre. Meyer, he's just a grocery man. And he said in 1939. Instead, if you look in now we don't need to magnify it, but you see the circles. And the portion of the circle that is dark is the level of destruction by the 8th Air Force, especially in Germany. 15th Air Force went other places. And there's Berlin, half gone, and others of them even worse than that. Dresden, for instance. So we get to working up our way of Italy, and finally, on June 6, 1944, D-Day. And we always call it, in military terms, D-Day is the day something's going to happen, and H hour is the hour it's going to happen. But this invasion was it's become almost, it's as if 6th of June kind of owns the term D-Day, although even still today, every military. The 82nd Airborne from Toccoa to Fort Benning, and the 101st from Toccoa, from Fort Benning, into the dark in the middle of the night, and did very well. The next morning, air cover to protect them. Meantime, break through the Gustav line and go all the way you can. Alexander first and Clark with him, although Clark would say it the other way around. Follow up with the breakout, Caratan and Saint-Lô. And then eventually by early August, 14 to 18 divisions already landed in northwestern France. Push them on and push them on. And then, just for good measure, another invasion. Tell us about it, sir.
Went from below?
Yeah.
Marseille. I think it's on just before I landed in Normandy, the Marseille one came on. I only heard about it a couple of years ago.
Okay. Well, that's why you came today, and that's why I put it in here. By the way, to give credit, the animated map is a piece of work from Army Command and General Staff College. It's not classified, and you can download it if you want to, but I like it because when I was in Army Command and Staff College, it was acetates and maybe roll them one scene and another across an overhead projector. So we're glad for this. And in very quick order, liberate France. And this way, a little bit of time here. Within a week of the first D-Day landings, 6th of June, just a few days later, was the beginning of the V-1, Vengeance weapon, the V-1. It's the first cruise missile, if you will, unmanned missile. It's a very primitive pulse jet engine, and the popping sound it makes is why they end up calling it the buzz bombs or the doodle bugs. Built 30,000 of them, sent 22,000 or more towards England, and always good if you can't defeat an enemy, you just try to deceive an enemy. The British press, in concert with the British government, put out, yes, there were doodle bugs yesterday. Luckily, though, they landed way beyond London, way beyond London. They landed out in the countryside. No, they didn't. They were hitting London. Germans hear this, and they reset well, not really all down, but the mechanism, that little propeller doesn't in the front is just a wind vane. It turns the dials and gears of a mechanical flight controller, autopilot, and when it gets to a certain number, it turns off the engine. So they recalibrated their autopilot, and doodle bugs end up in the English Channel. If you can't be, led to the V2, and we'll go real quick to this. V2 went 50 miles up and then came down with a single warhead. After the war, we captured a whole bunch of them, and a V2 with some modifications became the WAC Corporal, which became the Juno, which became the Jupiter, which led to, not directly to the Saturn. And then there's the V3. V3 is a different kind of super gun, a gun that could shoot a 155 millimeter round from France or Belgium all the way to London, England. They got the idea from Americans. After Civil War, before World War I, Haskell and Lyman together, if you fire a cartridge, the explosive force forces the bullet down the barrel, right? Well, if it gets part way and you fire it again, and this one had 4 firing chambers, the same bullet is going to go further, go faster. Great idea, except how do you time without a computer to do it? Well, they were working on it, and they were trying. This is the drawing of the installation, and Montclair, this is the one that I saw in Paris, when I was in Paris and I went AWOL, don't tell my boss, I went AWOL for a couple of days to Normandy. This is the ramps that they would have fired from. Idea, take one of those B-24s and take the Navy version, which is nearly the same, and have this fine fellow who had all the accolades any Navy aviator would ever expect to have. Fill it, no bombs, no machine guns, no ammunition, instead just full of plastic explosive, or the version that existed in those days. And then his idea is he will take it off and set it and then turn over radio controls so somebody back in probably Dover or thereabouts can fly it like you play with a joystick, fly it. Problem is, some short or static electricity, he flipped the switch and the whole thing vaporized. There's nothing left to bury. There's no remnants of the aircraft to recreate it like this. And this man is gone. This man had, from a rich, powerful political family, had been geared and groomed from the practically earliest days of his life to go to this school and then go to the war and then come home a hero and go to the Congress and then go to the Senate and then be the President of the United States. But what's Dad going to do? Dad, by the way, is at this time he had worked his way to being the ambassador to England, so he had some pull. What are you going to do? We'll look at baby brother, who is also a Navy officer, but not in a fancy airplane. He's got a little plywood boat out in the Pacific someplace. And he did good work, but with some political and military pressuring, built him an image and a reputation to the point that, do you recognize him? We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, because it is hard. Boston, they park the car in the yard in Boston. Well, that's him. And that leads us to these ladies. And this one is this one, and you don't need this one. Or go ahead.
All right, so we're just going to talk really quickly about the war effort and how women had a part in that. All of the servicemen were abroad. Everyone was enlisting to fight. They were going. They were leaving their families. Things changed for everyone back home, and it changed for women too. I'm portraying a woman in the Land Army, in the Women's Land Army. Basically, young women, usually they didn't have families, would come out of the cities to work on the farms. One of the diaries of one of the Women's Land Army women in Great Britain said that I had never even seen a cow before, and my assignment was to milk 50 cows a day. So those are just some of the things that these women, these farms still had crops growing on them. The farms still had some family members still left at home, some women and young people that were still tending these farms, but they had lost their men to help with that. And so these women worked for the government, both British government and American government. They were paid a very unskilled labor type wage, but they were farm hands. And so this is what I'm portraying today, is a Women's Land Army. Another way women were involved was in the Women's Air Force service pilots. So Eden, she had a green sweater, because the ladies would wear green sweaters too. I went with the summer version of not wearing a sweater today. So Eden's got a flight suit that we're just holding up, just to give an example of what they would have worn. These women, this group was formed in 1943 and was disbanded then in 1944. So they were only in service for 2 years. They were doing, they called it the dishwashing work of the U.S. or the military as it went for airplanes. They did all the work that nobody else really wanted to do, or the work that just had to be done, but there wasn't a male pilot there to do it. So they were ferrying aircraft. If they needed to get an aircraft from one coast to the other, they would pick it up and take it. There's no GPS around at this time. You're giving this giant aircraft to a woman and saying, plan your stops, make your fuel stops, get out of the airplane at a place that you're probably not familiar with. Look out after this is very dangerous, the ferrying. You would think, when I finish describing, you'll think, oh, I can't believe that was the most dangerous thing, but it's very dangerous for the women to do at this time. Another thing that they did was they would test repaired airplanes. They would test new airplanes. They were often the first person to fly an aircraft right off of the assembly line. They would train male pilots. Women were very well accepted at the time as teachers. And so to have a woman teaching you how to do something was very normal. But these women were not in the commercial industry. They weren't flying airplanes. They weren't flying airplanes, flying them full of people. They weren't flying military operations. They were just getting planes where they needed to be. Another thing that they did, which according to their histories, it was not the most dangerous thing. Interesting though, is they would carry a banner on the back like we see at beaches, carrying messages, except those were targets for live target practice. They would paint the bullets of the guys on the ground with anti-aircraft so that they could see what color punched a hole in the target that the WASP woman was flying. Incredible group of women, brave and really doing things that no woman was doing at this time. I got to look at her name just to make sure that I get it right. Marion Stegman Hodgkin. So those of you that are familiar with the University of Georgia probably recognize Stegman Hall and Hodgkin Hall. So she's an Athens native. She got her wings in 1943, and she was based in Dallas Field in Texas, in Love Field in Dallas, Texas. And she was one of the farriers who would just move planes from one place to the other wherever she was told. This is a picture of Betty Tackleberry Blake. She was in the very first class of the WASP women in 1943. This is a picture of her from before 2015. She's carrying around a B-51 Mustang because of all the aircraft she flew, that was her favorite. She did pass away in 2015. Whoop. There we go. The next way is, this is really the image that a lot of us get in our minds when we think of women during World War II as the bomb girls. The government put out propaganda in posters and things as Rosie the Riveter, which Eden here is portraying today. Rosie was not an actual person. She was an image. She was an ideal of what the government was calling women to step outside of their norms to do. These women, there was a huge demand for artillery shells, bombs, and bullets, but there was no one left to actually make them. And so these women would come, they would work. They worked long hours in hazardous environments and with chemicals that left lasting change, lasting problems for them with cancer and things like that. And so that's what Eden is portraying here today.
When the Germans took France, they remembered the humiliation of being in the train car. Between the war, France built this nice museum, the carriage house. And when the German says, bust it out of there and make people sit in exactly the same space as they were. In fact, one man was there twice. Colonel Wegman is now General Wegman. He was the only one that was there twice. And bust it out and take it, and don't want to have to sign another surrender. Took it all the way to Berlin, and later on in the war, took it out to the end of a rail line and burned it. That's why when you go to Paris or to Compiègne, north of Paris, the carriage you see is not the original. Now it's a sister ship. It's almost sequential serial number, so it looks legit, but no, you'll never find the real one. Get into rationing, talking about what the women did. But we have, I need a volunteer. You, that's the way the Army does it. Need the volunteer. We're going to make him look like a soldier today. Trust me, Fort Jackson, 1960s, I trained thousands of them. Put that in there, there you go. Oh. There he is, he looks good. And let me see, he needs a web belt, put that on, click it on side, and he has his canteen. Canteen, metal canteen, good for set it in the fire and you can get hot water. If you need to, and you just don't have a good water supply, because you know one of the first things that goes in wartime is the water system. So just use any creek water, mud puddle, whatever you have, and put one of these little pills in it. Have you done it, sir? Put it in, slosh it around, let it set for what, 20 minutes or so?
Can't remember.
But it still tastes like bleach anyway, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah. So he needs that. Put that back in your. Oh, wait a minute. Head protection. Well, we got to protect his head. He has the steel pot. And there's a liner that goes in it. But this steel pot protects him as best they can. Now he needs. He might have to carry messages, and so this is his briefcase. Yeah, it needs that. And, the gas mask, because we were worried still, might there be gas in the new war? No, we won't do that. And then the backpack, got to have the backpack. This is not JanSport by a long shot. There, and there, and in the backpack, he has everything he needs. There, okay. If the Army wanted you to have a wife, they'd issue you one, and it wouldn't fit either. You've heard that before, yeah. Now, this is his mess kit. Here he puts the vegetables, side dishes, and this might be the soup or the main dish, and he folds it up and clicks it together. But when he wants to clean it, should be a loop here, and they link together, and he scrubs it out with dirt, because dirt is an abrasive, right? You scrub out the scraps, and then he pushes it in hot, soapy water and brushes it. Then he comes over and rinses it in clear water. Then he dunks it in a sanitizing water, and his mess kit is good for the next meal. This, speaking of meals, though, where's my glasses? This is the infamous K ration. And this is what we're going to feed him today. We'll take good care of you, soldier. 1 package assorted biscuits, Ritz. 1 package lemon juice powder, Kool-Aid. 1 can pork luncheon meat, altogether? Spam, yes, exactly so. 1 D-ration chocolate bar, 4 tablets of sugar, 1 stick of chewing gum, and then, what does that say, sir?
That's cigarettes, matches, toilet paper.
3 cigarettes. That's all he got for the day. The U.S. government gave away cigarettes. We want you to smoke cigarettes. Have we come a long way or not? Like that. For security, do not discard the empty can. Okay, well, there's your rations. And he would study enemy aircraft with a book like this. This is original from the period, what the aircraft looks like and the silhouette, if that's all you see in the sky. Pass that around. If he needed to, he would send signals either with semaphore. Do you know semaphore? You're going to learn it right now. Okay, ready? Say with me. Ready? A, B, and then it gets fancier and fancier like that, so you can do numbers just as well. If semaphore is not available, then he knows wigwag. Wigwag is Morse code. You know Morse code? Did it, I did. And it's the same thing where a dit is this way and a da is that way. So what's the most famous Morse code phrase you know? SOS. Dit, 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 da, 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 dit, dit, dit. There you go. There's a fully equipped soldier. Round of applause for the soldier. Thank you. That's okay. Take this one off, and you can wear this one instead. Handsome boy. Good-looking soldier there. Thank you. And they're back.
So the
Go
Boy
ahead.
Scouts and Girl Scouts during World War II had a part to play just like the women did. The Boy Scouts of America collected metal like pots and pans, paper, and rubber to recycle into making war materials. They also sold war stamps and war bonds, which directly financially helped the Army or military. The Girl Scouts similarly planted victory gardens and collected fat for making ammunition and made thousands of care packages that might have included socks that were knitted or first aid packages. The Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts of America both demonstrated that they were patriotic and they could serve to others, which were things that they needed to do during World War II.
Thank you. Well, Hitler was popular, but not perfectly so. There was a time that Tom Cruise tried to kill him. Oh, wait a minute, no, it wasn't really Tom Cruise, but it looked like him. In fact, that was one, Operation Valkyrie. Valkyrie was an operational contingency plan. What if the government has total emergency situation, like we would have FEMA? What would we do? What would we do? And that's, in this case, Valkyrie. And so an element within the Army tried to operate Operation Valkyrie themselves. They had a nice bomb, 2 bombs in a briefcase, and they were going to set it right here where Hitler would be close to it. Problem is, someone moved the briefcase the other side of the table. The table was not spindly legs like that. It was solid wood, solid probably oak wood, which absorbed most of the explosion, to such that he was injured, and some others did die, but Hitler lived through it. Led to, drum roll, late in the war, going into December 1944, and we'll hurry things, Soviets really moving along, liberating as they went, but also imposing communist system, economics and politics as they go. Third Army, 7th Army, moving on, until December 1944, out of nowhere, believing that, we didn't know they had it in them, but out of nowhere, pushed through the American line, between British and American line, to the point that called it the Battle of the Bulge. And you were there, sir.
Yeah.
What unit?
14th Field Artillery Observation Battalion.
Observation Battalion.
Bounced around a lot.
They were out in front of the guns. Radio back or wire? Did you have radios or telephone?
We had microphones in the ground.
Oh, okay.
It was long range.
Well,
Prehistoric now, but it was
oh, yeah.
pretty nice then.
Oh, it'd be digital now. You do it with your thumbs. Yeah, did you talk to a satellite in the sky? The 101st Airborne, and Airborne, you jump once, and after that you're an infantryman again, was holding the line as best they could. The commanding general was back in America for other reasons and official reasons, such that the brigadier general, McAuliffe, was there. They woke him up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said, nuts, because he had been out on the line until about midnight, and it had been this way for 16, 18 days in a row that he was at those protracted hours. Later on, they told him that the Germans are here and they are offering surrender. He did not say nuts. He used something that we won't say here today, but it would not be appropriate for an American Army general to say, but he invited them to enjoy a session of self-fornication, shall we say. That's what he really said. But the PR department says other things, and yes, he did say nuts, but it was disgusted with being woken up early in the morning. Here's another man that was there. He's 80th Division. Until a few months ago, when he needed to go someplace else, he was my neighbor at the village of Deaton Creek. Did you remember him, Bill Bond? He went to Arbor Terrace, where they all go from Deaton Creek. It's phase 4 of the Pulte plan. He was a truck driver, and he came home and bought a truck, and then another one, and when he sold it out to one of the big companies that's still around, he had 106 trucks on the road. That's the Battle of the Bulge. Terrible losses on both sides, but it was the battle that sealed the fate to the point that the Bulge came in, and Montgomery said he could be there in a week or so, and Patton said we'll be there tomorrow, or roughly so, and they were. Close the bulge, squeeze them both ways. I hate that. Do it again. Race for the Rhine. Get almost all the way there. It's called the bridge at Remagen, or the Remagen Bridge. It's really the Ludendorff Bridge at the town of Remagen. And it was, for many miles in each direction, the last bridge left. It had been mined, it had been booby-trapped for the sake of quick demolition when the last German came across and before any American or other Allied came. This is a stylized painting. I don't know if it ever happened that way, but that's what it looked like. Two men. Notice the names. First Lieutenant Karl Timmerman, about as German as you could get, don't you think? First generation American. His father was in the German army on the losing side in World War I. Came to America for a better life, given the terrible economic, political circumstances we started with today. Other men, sergeant, staff sergeant, same as you, staff sergeant, although they called it technical sergeant then. Alexander Drobnik, that's a Polish man if I ever heard one. Same kind of thing. Came here before World War I, is still a first generation born here American, worked his way to staff sergeant. Karl Timmerman, in fact, went in as a private and went to Officer Candidate School. 90-day wonder, they called him. And together, they saved the bridge. Sergeant Drobnik says, "Who's going with me? I'm going across." And 6 or 8 men down there. He didn't say you, and you. Soldiers, leadership, dedication to duty, understanding the mission, we must save this bridge. They went along one side. Timmerman on the other side didn't say anything at all. Just jumped up and started going, and his men followed him. Didn't have to give a command. They understood the mission to the point that together, bullets bouncing off steel girders as they go, they saved the bridge. And in the next few weeks, we put division after division across, wore the bridge out. But by then, Army engineers, pontoon, had built a replacement bridge anyway. They both got the Distinguished Service Cross. Next thing, the only thing higher is Medal of Honor. That's what's left of it today. And so, yes, let the British have their part up north. Let the Soviets have the honor of taking the capital, and as tradition, if you take the enemy's capital, that's the definition of winning the war. Every case except 1812. We won't talk about that. And so the lines of occupation. Purple is American, pale green is British, and the French in their territory, and the Soviets with their part. Divide also Berlin at the same time, 4 different ways. And so today, the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in Europe, tomorrow is the beginning of the Cold War. And I thank you very much. Wish you well. Ladies, come on back. We have photos in their other outfits, but you need to see these. And they did good work with those since what? Monday. Yeah, Monday afternoon. Yeah. Met them at the church before a meeting, right?
Did it for the war.